All right, so what is left? What is left now, if you look up on the screen here, hopefully we've done all this stuff. We've checked the loan, we've checked the loan amount, we've checked the interest rate, we've checked the number of payments, we did all this good stuff. All right, we modularized, we've used good naming conventions, we've used sound logic, I hope. Our colors are okay, our layout is okay. So what's left is to figure out this thing right here, which was our monthly payment. All right, and this was the formula. I also gave you on the back, I said if you didn't like that, here was another example where they did a monthly, they call it for a mortgage, but it's the same, pretty much the same formula. Sometimes if you see two of the same thing, all right, that's written a little differently, it may make more sense to you. I don't know. I don't know if it makes more sense to you or not. But let's write the code for the last routine. And it really isn't very big. I actually created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 variables. And after that, there's just one line of code. All right? Actually, I should say that there's like 3 lines of code. Okay, so here's my code. All right, so this is for calculate the payment. Notice that now the only error I have, so the only thing that's red is there's no return in here. So that's what we're going to do. If I do take my mouse and put it up near the top here, you know, it's going to find something when I look up here. It's going to find typos. It says 1 error. That's the 1 error. 5 warnings. Well, I can check on those. All right. My goal, not in this one, all right, but probably not by the end of the week because tomorrow's Friday, but early next week, we're going to go and we're going to write the rock, paper, scissors. We don't even want a warning in there. We want to get rid of every warning that we have. All right? So we'll do that. And again, in an ideal world, that's what's going to happen. All right. So let's go down and write this last function. Okay. Now the bad thing is I cannot come in here, grab this, copy it, and then put it into my file because all that stuff will copy in a funky way. You understand what I'm saying here? All right. But hopefully, as I put the stuff in, it'll make sense to you. And if it doesn't, I'm hoping you're going to ask. All right. So, double. First one I called monthly payment. All right. And I set that equal to 0.0. Now, I can put a comment there, but it's just going to say this is the monthly payment. All right. I didn't want to have to work with all of this stuff. I didn't want to write something that was as ugly as this. I wanted to be able to write something where I was using words that made sense to me. So this is why I did what I'm about to show you. All right. So I came in here and I said double principal equals double dot parse double loan amount dot get text. That was neat. Dot to string. Let me move this over so you can see all of it. All right, so that's the first one. Then I said double rate equal. The good news is I can copy this because it's almost the same thing. But I don't want loan amount. I want interest rate. All right. Now, remember, if you look up on the screen here, let's assume that I wanted to put in here a 13% interest rate. Everybody with me? Okay, so what I'm saying is I'm assuming that the person who runs this code right here, let's say they wanted to borrow $50,000. But here they're going to put in this. I'm assuming that's what they're going to put in. Now, I could set it up. I could have had a message here that said put it in as 0.13. But I figured it would be easier for somebody to do it this way. You may not agree with that, and that's okay. I know, I think, Tiffany, you said that yesterday, and it's fine. You should always, if you can, try to, especially if it's an app like this, don't assume that the user knows everything you want them to do. If there's anything that's in there that could possibly be confusing to them, try to avoid the confusion. Try to get rid of the confusion. All right? So what I'm telling you is, I'm assuming it looks like this. You look on the screen here. So the first thing I did was I immediately took that and I divided it by 100, which is going to give me 0.13. Does that make sense? But that's annual interest. I want monthly interest. Since there's 12 months in a year, I took that answer and then divided it by 12. Does that make sense? And I don't know what that's going to be. I don't care. But that's the way that I did it. And to try to keep it easy for myself, and again, I do things sometimes, and when I do them, if you say, why'd you do it like that? Because it made sense to me. That doesn't mean necessarily me doing it that way made total sense to you. All right? I mean, I might grade Ethan's test tonight and say, geez, I wonder why he did it that way. But it worked. And probably if I asked him, he'd say, it made sense to me. Okay. All right? So I came in here, and now I've got that rate, but then right below it, I immediately said this. I said rate divided by equals 100. 100. And then I did it again. Rate divided by equals 12. Now, could I have just done it rate divided by rate equals rate divided by 100 divided by 12? Yes. This could have been changed to one line, but probably I would have put a comment here that said something like, make it a percent. And then down here, I would have said, make it, so this would have really make it an annual percentage. And then this could have said, make it a monthly percentage. All right? And again, you may not like my comments. Then you put in your own. All right? So that's the first things here that I did. All right? All right. Then I wanted the number of payments because I needed that for the formula. So int numPays. And what is that? Well, that's equal to integer.parseInt of numPayments dot getText dot to string. Now, if you look up on the screen here, this is what I want you to get out of this. This one right here, this one right here, and that one right there. That's just grabbing those values that are in those the respective edit texts. That's all it's doing. But I can do that now because I know their numbers and I know they're valid numbers. Because if they were invalid, it would have been caught earlier. All right? So, and I mentioned this, somebody asked yesterday, it was over there, it was Colin, it was Brady, it was somebody else, I don't know, I don't care. But I said, you know what? To me, it would make more sense to break this thing up into really two different equations. The top one and the bottom one. Does that make sense? You may or may not agree with that, but to me it made more sense to do that. That's all. So that's what I did. And I didn't give them, you know, really neat names or anything. All right? I called them top half and I called them bottom half. But both of them require that I use that thing where it's the 1 plus the rate or whatever. So both of them, if you look right here, both of these have a 1 plus r. Everybody see that? So I even made that its own variable. So my next variable was another double, 1 plus rate, and I set that equal to 1 plus rate. All right? Then, after doing all that, I broke it up into the top half and into the bottom half. All right? So, this was the top half. So right there, this thing right there in blue that I'm calling top half, that's going to be this right here. Then I'm going to do bottom half, and that's this right here. All right? Like I said, to me, that just made sense to do it that way. You may agree with that. You may not agree. All right? So it was rate times math.pow 1 plus rate num pays. So this right here, that whole thing, I didn't spell it right. All right, that's the top half of the equation. And now I'm going to do the bottom half. Well, at least if I'm going to screw it up, I'm screwing it up every time. 1 minus 1. All right, and then finally, what's left? Monthly payment equals principal times, now it's just simply top half divided by bottom half. That's the whole thing. And then I think they just want to return the monthly payment. I think that's it. Return monthly payment. And that's it. Now again, you may or may not agree with the way I did it, which is fine. You know, Colin just mentioned that during the break, that where I had one flag, that keep going flag, he had 3 different ones. All right, I don't know if these are the names he used. He didn't tell me, but he had like valid interest rate, valid number, a number of payments, valid loan amount. That's fine. What you have to be able to start learning, all right, and you know it already, whether you realize it or not, you've all, over the past almost 2 years, you all have the intellectual ability to do these programs in any language you've learned. The problems that you run into, by and large, are syntactical in nature because you do it differently in C#. You may have to tweak it a little bit in ASP.NET. It was totally different in JavaScript, and now it's different again in Java. The good news is, probably for most of you here who fancy yourselves programmers, who want to become programmers, if you go to work for a company, there's probably a pretty good chance you'll use 1 or at the most 2 different languages. You won't be using a different one every few months like we're doing. Now, let's do a save all. Let's run it. I mean, my original one worked. Could I have typed in something incorrect here? Easily. Didn't try to, but I could. Could have. Now, if you look up on the screen, please, if you got to this point, let's just say you all did, all right, what should you be testing? Well, first of all, there's nothing in there, right? So now I can click Calculate. You can see my no input, try again, and I'm right on that field. So I've tested that one thing. Then I can test for something. What was my range? It was 5,000 to 1,000,000, correct? So I'm going to put in here $4,999.99. All right? And I'm going to click Calculate. And it says loan amount out of range. That's good. Now I'm going to try $1,000,001. And it again says loan amount out of range. That's good. All right. Now I'm going to put in the number that we had that was in the example, which was 5,000. All right. Well, now it should come back and tell me my interest rate is no input, try again. See that? Now, do you all realize I used a generic message for no input? All right, I used the same one. Maybe that wasn't good. Maybe I should have used 3 different ones. All right, but I kept you in that field. I thought that was sufficient. You may or may not agree with that. So again, the interest rate was supposed to be between 1% and 25%. So I'm going to click on there, and I'm going to try putting in a 0. And it says interest rate out of range. That's good. So I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to try 25.1, which again should be out of range. And it is. So I know those both work. All right? So what did we want in here? It was 7.5%. So I will come back in here and now put in 7.5. All right, I'm going to click. Now, and again, it should tell me, because there's nothing in number of payments. Boom. Well, it says interest rate. Well, I don't know how. I guess I didn't change that, but let's 7.5. All right, come over to here. Okay. Well, it doesn't like something in my interest rate. I don't know what. It was working before, but it's not now. That's fine. All right. Let's just try it. Well, it takes 7. No, doesn't like that either. So maybe something I put into yours was wrong. I don't know. Now it says no input. Something's goofy on there. Don't know what it is. Let's try and putting a number in here and see if it works. Doesn't like something with my interest rate. So I'm going to go back right now, right in front of you here, and I'm going to look at what I've got in my interest rate, as opposed to this. This was my master copy, the one that I basically ripped my own code off from. So let's look at it. All right. Interest rate, interest rate. I think I do have to put in a number between 0.01 and 0.25. All right, that may be the case. I don't know. I didn't think that was the case, but all right. But I'm looking at the code that's in here, and it looks sound to me. It's like I didn't miss anything. Be real leery if you come in and like I did, and you copy everything from right here, and you copy it and paste it down into here. Be real leery of doing that, because you've got to make sure that you change all the variables. All right, that's what I was looking for, is to make sure I, In fact, let me look. If you look up on the screen here, I'm wondering if this should be 1 and that one should be 25. I'm going to copy these lines of code here. Comment those out. And I'm going to change these to 1.0. And I'm going to change this one to 25.0. Like that. Alright, so it was 5,000, and it was 7.5, and it was 60, I believe. 60? Doesn't like something that I've got in there. I changed that to this, and it didn't like that. So I'm not sure what the problem is. Payments, payments, payments. Oh, look. There's a problem with the number of payments. I didn't change that. There's one thing. So that's wrong. Payments, payments, payments. Okay, that all looked okay. I'm going to just look at. Okay, that was 1. That was 25. That should work. Try that just for the heck of it. Oh boy, something's goofed up. I'll tell you what I'll do by the end of class is this one worked. I just want to show you. All right, so I'm gonna actually close this and bring up the original that I took this from. So let me save all, and let me close the project and open an existing project. Should be that one. That's one too. What's that? This is the old one. Okay.
Doesn't like it there. Instead, do it inside the string value of above it.
Okay, then let me close this and bring the other one back up. Close project. Close project. Open existing project. In here, right there.
Actually,
There.
Yeah, it's straight value.
All right. I don't know why I'm getting $100.19 though. So something is goofed up in the formula, but yeah, you can see. I'm just curious if I totally remove that period. That's the only thing I could think of that was actually changed. So I'm not going to do the formatting. I just want to see if I don't do the formatting, if I get the right answer to the wrong number of decimal places or not. No, something's goofed up in the formula. Let me check this. Payment is 0, principal double amount. Double interest rate, that's good.
Okay, are you trying to make it to where it produces
Yes.
a value that's the same as this?
Yes.
So you do not divide by 12 at all.
Okay.
You just want to run that exact formula.
Well, that would make no. Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it. Let's see.
Because if you're dividing the rate by 12, right? Monthly rate. Don't you want the monthly payment amount rather? If you want to do it that way, can you divide the payment by 12?
That would make sense. Closer.
Yeah.
I'll go back and take a look at mine and just see where I goofed up. Okay. If you want a hard copy of this, just email me and let me know, and I will give you a hard copy of it. That's fine.
That's why I asked you yesterday if you wanted it to produce the results of this, where this came from. Because if you start dividing by 12, it'll be, it won't.
All right. So we are in part 2. From part 1, I'm just going to back up on this for a minute. All right. So from here, I'm not sure what yet. I don't know for sure if I'm going to have you use this same test we just did or a different one. I don't know. But if you look up on the screen, please, you should be able to use one of those first 3 layouts that's there. Any one of those 3. All right. When we work on the rock paper scissors game, we are going to do some more work with layouts. So we'll even do some nesting of layouts so you can see how they're used. All right. And as far as I'm concerned, basically any of the stuff that's shown right here, editable text views, checkboxes, radio buttons, spinners, seek bars, the images we'll get to. All right, we haven't gotten to that yet, but those 1, 2, 3, 4, those first 5 things, they're all fair game. All right. All right, what I'm going to do then, if you look up on the screen here, I'm going to now jump into Chapter 6. All right, and we'll just keep going on. Will we get any further than this today? I don't know. In an ideal world, we would between today and tomorrow be able to do 6, 7, 8, and 9. That would mean that on Monday of next week, we'd be able to start on rock, paper, scissors, or another app. All right, that's what I'd like to be able to do. Okay, we'll see how it goes. Now, they mentioned here, and this, again, you may like this, you may not like this, but when you're dealing with the different widgets that you have available to you in Android, when you are dealing with those, again, good or bad or indifferent, all right, there's more than one way to do it. So one of the first things they show in here is they say, hey, we want to go from point A to point B, and they show you 4 ways to do it. All right, everybody hear what I just said? I would recommend you look at those and say, this one makes the most sense to me. Then just use that one. You are not at all impressing me by showing me that you can do it all 4 ways. Not a bit. All right? So, like many other languages that we've talked about before, when you're working with Java Android, it's an event listener. So in other words, Android is sitting there waiting for things to happen. And when those things happen, it responds based on what you have or have not added in code. You can add a button, but if you don't have any on-click event or nothing set up for the button, nothing happens when you click it. But there's all sorts of things that you can do. All right? One of the really nice things about Android, just so you know this, if you look up on the screen, please, may not sound like a big thing to you, that is really nice right there. Because by choosing one of these, now you can be sure that what goes in there are only numbers. That's pretty good. Now, let's assume that you didn't have that. So let's say we don't have that. Then one thing that we could do is we could check that every single time you put something into an edit text, every single time you put something in there, we could check it as it was going in. And we could say if the first character that we typed in was either a number or a decimal point or a minus sign or a plus sign, it's okay. And if there's anything else after that, it's not okay. That makes sense? So we could, in essence, write our own one of these. Now, we don't want to do that because somebody did it for us, and they tested the heck out of it. But before those were available, that's how you had to write things. Okay? So you could write your own if you really wanted to. And instead of this, you could make it, just whatever. And just allow certain things. But if you look in here, because this is what's important, notice what's also in there. Passwords, emails, phone numbers. And there's even some other ones when you work your way down through there. There's some autocomplete and some other stuff. Those are all set up so that some of the work that you might want to do will be done for you. All right? And speaking personally, I think that's a really good thing. All right. So in this chapter, as you can see right here, they're going to talk about listeners. There's two different kinds. There are high-level listeners, and those are only for some of the widgets that are in here. And there's low-level listeners, and that's for everything. For instance, every kind of widget can respond to being clicked on. So a click event is something that any widget can respond to. All right? That's an example of a low-level event. You're going to see the high levels in just a minute. So they will talk to you and they will give you 4 different ways for handling events. If you look at this, you can use the current class as the listener. You can use a named class as the listener. You can use an anonymous class as the listener. What does anonymous class mean? The class doesn't have a name. It's anonymous. Or you can use an inner anonymous class as the listener. What's the difference between these two? With an anonymous class, typically it's going to be another, with the inner anonymous class, it's going to be right in the file. But the author does this and talks about these only over 2 or 3 pages. But then if you look right here, it says when to use each technique. He even says in here, you should use the one that makes the most sense to you. All right? And he picks the first one that he's already introduced to you in an earlier chapter and says, I'm pretty much going to use this one all the time. All right. So then the rest of the chapter is on how to handle, look at those high-level events. That's on how to handle events for checkboxes, radio buttons, radio groups, which is a group of radio buttons, all right, spinners, which is that drop-down list, and the seek bar, which is like a slider. All right, so we'll talk about those. Then we talk about some of the low-level events. Now, if you look on the screen, because this is important, the touch is probably the most important, because many people who are going to use an Android app are not going to use it on a tablet. They're going to use it on a phone. So the touch is very, very important. In fact, on a phone, it's probably more important than key events. All right. Then they go back to the tip calculator again, and notice they'll talk about changes they've made in the user interface, and then they'll have the associated code for that. It's not really a very long chapter, not even 20 pages long. All right? So I don't want to read to you, but I'd like you, please, look on the screen and read that first paragraph, because you have to understand what a listener is. Now, the key thing for that, as far as what they're talking about in there, is what I mentioned to you before. It says when an event occurs, the appropriate method is executed. But if you have no code there, nothing happens. All right? The only thing that we have done so far, is if you go back and look at our program that we just looked at, if I click on the button here, on the on-click event, we told it what we wanted to have happen. All right? We did that without having to really set up any, code, so to speak. In fact, once we did that, notice if I click here and I click the down arrow, or if I try to click the down arrow, but if you click the down arrow, it'll show all the ones that are available to you in there. So again, I mentioned this before, let's say it again. High-level events occur on only certain types of widgets. Low-level events occur on all widgets. So if you look here, they've got listeners for high-level events and listeners for low-level events here on page 195. And again, I've said this kind of thing to you before. Don't think, yeah, I'm going to memorize that. That's not going to do diddly for you. All right? A lot of this stuff is when you have questions, concerns, etc., is to just know where to go to look to find it. I don't know if you remember this from the C# class, but for some reason, I can never remember the code in C# to set it up for your exit button. Remember how we put that message box up? And so I just emailed it to you guys last year, and I emailed it to the class this year. I always go grab that email and just copy the code out of it. All right? Why? Because I've got some kind of a brain fart when I try to figure it out myself. All right? That's not cheating. That's being smart, to be honest with you. All right? So don't think about memorizing this stuff, is what I'm saying. All right? So you notice here, Android view.view, on click. Well, we use that with a button. That associated the on-click listener with our button. All right? So again, it's important if you're not going to read this, I don't know, you don't have the time, you don't have the desire, whatever, to at least page your way through it and look at the page, the one that's on the right, and I think those are what? Those are the even numbers? Nope, the odd numbers. So look at the one, and then look at on the bottom when they summarize everything. All right? You know, what's that? Yes, the long click. Typically, it's like more than 2 seconds, I think. No, you don't set the time. No, well, can you? Yes, but it's typically, there's some things that are set up like that it's waiting, needs more time in order to be able to do some kind of reaction. Now, I told the class this morning, and a couple of them looked at me like I was being a smart aleck or something. I wasn't trying to be. But I told them, I said, listen, what we've done, they've got a test next Tuesday on chapters 9, 10, and 11. They went into object-oriented more than you guys did in C#. All right? They went into inheritance more than you guys did in C#. They went into exceptions more than you guys did in C#. They're not better students than you. They're not worse students than you. All right? I just decided with the amount of time we had, etc., that I was going to do it that way. But we've also done several programs for all 3 of those chapters as a class. So what I told them this morning was, listen, we've done several programs as a class. I've gone over. The tapes are out there. But there's no way that those tapes can make up for what's in the chapter. So if you take the test on Tuesday and you fail the test because of something and you say, well, I never read the chapter, it ain't my problem. There's only so much that I can do. All right? And the tests are given based on what's in the chapter. The tests are not given based on my lectures as far as what's in the chapter. All right? And the same thing is for you guys. All right, so these are the 4 techniques. So the author says, back in chapter 3, we learned 1 technique for handling an event. So the first thing they do here is they go right back over that technique. Then they go over the other 3 techniques. So again, the easiest way I can tell you, it's like, okay, I know Ethan because he says he lives in Lake St. Louis, and so do I. All right, I have no idea where he lives in Lake St. Louis. It's none of my business. But if he told me where it was and I was supposed to meet him, my guess is there'd probably be at least a couple ways I could get there. There might be 4 ways I can get there. That's what they're saying right here. All right? So you pick the one that makes the most sense to you, and that's the one you really should use. To some people, well, it's the one that's got the least amount of code. Fine. If that's your rationale, then pick that one. I would say where most of you are in your programmatic career, I would look at all 4 of them and say which one of these just makes the most sense to me. That's the one I'd pick. All right? So the first example that they give is the one that's right here, 2A. And you don't have to worry about this until now. So the point is, what you have to do in Java, all right, this is not really even an Android thing, this is a Java thing, is when you want to go in and start being able to programmatically manipulate the widgets. We have not really been programmatically manipulating the widgets, but when you want to, you have to associate listeners with them, because the system has to know when you do certain things to those things, how it should react. And that's what they're talking about here. So you'll notice, for example, a lot of these are going to start with android.view.view. Remember that where I had view v in a bunch of those? That's what they're talking about here. All right. In fact, I showed you this the other day. Most of the time, when you've got your own method that you write that's going to manipulate widgets, you'll almost always have view V, at least, inside of the parens. All right, so this is one way of doing it. Implement the interface for the listener. All right, so they say you import it, you implement it, and for lack of better words, you use it. And we didn't go over this in much depth and breadth of coverage, but that was in the first tip calculator program. All of that stuff was. All right. And what is that stuff? Remember, we had the plus button and the minus button. We wanted to make sure when you click that plus button, okay, we wanted it to change something that was in a text field, right? We wanted it to go up by 1 every time. All right, that was the way it was reacting. Or if we click the minus button, we wanted it to go down by 1 every time. That's exactly what they're talking about in there. So you have to import the correct interface. Then you have to implement it by saying it implements that interface. Then you actually have to use it. All right. When you do this, okay, as it says, set the listeners. For lack of better words, because this is the way I've heard of it explained. This right here, for lack of better words, that's kind of registering the listeners. You are letting the system know that these are the listeners that you're going to be using. You're going to see this in more depth and breadth of coverage as we go on. That's the first way of doing it. So that's what they talk about right here. Using the current class as the listener. Then second, they say how you can handle the click event for 2 buttons by creating a separate class named button listener. All right. So how does that differ? Well, notice, it's actually, I got to keep going. Come on. So in the second way, we create a brand new class. And we put the code in there. They're all the same thing. All 4 of these examples are basically the same. It's the wrapper that's outside of them that's different. And I think really the only way this is going to make sense is for us to be writing some programs that are going to use this stuff. Otherwise, to me at least, it's not going to make a lot of sense. So look at what the author says here. In most cases, you can use any of these 4 techniques. So which should you use? In most cases, it's largely a matter of personal preference. It's the one that makes the most sense to you. That's what I'd say. All right. It's 2:30. Why don't we take another break? Let's come back. It's 2:33. Let's come back about 2:45. I want to at least finish this chapter today. All right.